This week on Sources, we speak with clinical psychologist Josie Solomon, a 27-year-old remigrant dedicated to strengthening mental health services in Guyana. With experiencing trauma-informed care, program design, and social impact work across Guyana and the U.S., Josie has built an impressive track record at a young age. She now continues her mission through the launch of Soul Sen Therapy and Coaching, a service focused on expanding access to compassionate, evidence-based support. In this edition of Sources, we explore her journey home, her work with vulnerable communities, and the urgent mental health issues facing Guyanese children and families. Welcome to Sources. I'm your host, Svetlana Marshall. Tonight, I have a clinical psychologist in studio who's going to be telling me all about her work, her passion for children, and her love for Guyana. Her name is Josie Solomon. Josie, welcome to Sources.
Thank you so much.
How have you been?
I've been all right. How about you?
I'm great. I'm doing well. All right. Tell me a little about who Josie really is.
Well, see, I'm the type of person I need like context for questions. So what is it you're exactly wanting to hear
Tell
about?
me a little bit about your background. You know, where you came from. I know you're a remigrant. You went to the U.S. You lived in the islands as well.
Yeah.
And what brought you back to Guyana?
Okay, so I do love giving this story, especially when I'm doing therapy with children, especially children from certain backgrounds, because it kind of gives them somebody who is real and somebody who kind of relates somewhat to where they're coming from. So I always have to give this whole spiel about all the places I've lived so far. So obviously I was born here in Guyana, was in Mabora, then ended up moving to Antigua for a few years, moved back to Guyana to facilitate the migration process, and then moved to the US where I did most of my schooling. And by the time I completed high school, I decided, okay, I want to go somewhere else. Originally, I wanted to go to Canada, but it ended up being, I guess, faith led me to go to England. So I did my university studies at the University of East London in London, the UK. Basically, what led me to going with this passion of psychology is I remember I don't only want to include high school, but throughout most of my childhood, I felt as though, I don't want to say it was really hard, but it was emotionally difficult for me as a child in the environment I was in, with the persons I was surrounded by. I remember many times just staying in school so I wouldn't have to face what was potentially happening at home, or just trying to distract myself with so many different things. My childhood is marked by a lot of basically survival. So even though a lot of people were very proud of me and all that I accomplished in such a short amount of time, I don't think they recognize a lot of it was escape. As in, like, I'm fighting really hard to give myself a good future so I never have to come back into this environment. And so around the age of 16, when I was kind of reflecting on, okay, I don't think I want to be a gynecologist anymore, because originally I wanted to be a gynecologist. And I was like, I don't really want to physically touch people, but I still want to be some sort of doctor, And then I was talking to one of my friends, and she was saying, you're really good at supporting people and helping people and talking to them. And that is how I came across, or deciding, okay, I think I want to be a psychologist. But what type of psychologist? And that's kind of how I led to wanting to be a clinical psychologist, because I really love science. And it kind of like marries together, where I can show this empathetic side to myself, but also still be able to use numbers and help people. I hope that's clear.
Yeah,
and I remember when we had like these guidance counseling sessions preparing us to apply for university, I was speaking to one of my teachers, and she was saying, oh, Guyana, is that the place that's the suicide capital of the world?
Yeah.
And I was like, it is? And like since then, you can change my mind about not doing it, because in my mind, like, it was set in stone. Like,
and you wanted to make a difference.
Yeah, I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back home, and I'm going to make an impact, because many of my friends, we all kind of was in the same low kind of standing throughout our childhood. Like, I would wake up or keep my phone by me at midnight and late in the morning, because one of my friends would be having a crisis, and I'm like, all of us were going through such difficult things as children with no one to talk to. And most of the help that we received was probably from strangers, like teachers that were really close to us or guidance counselors. Like I even remember one year it was just too much for me. And I went to one of my teachers and she actually helped me enroll in therapy, which was free for us because of the school I went to. And that kind of marked a big change in my life.
How important it is for us to have this conversation about therapy. I know in Ghana still still a lot of stigma attached to, if somebody's going to counseling or therapy, it's not something that we're big on. How important it is.
I think given our landscape, it's really important that we let people know that nothing has to be wrong with you, or nothing major has to be happening in your life for you to want to go to therapy. Therapy is a place that you can go to just if you're looking to have somebody to talk through like challenges you may be having in your career. Sometimes you're going through a transition, like you're moving house. It doesn't have to be a big, difficult thing, and I just want more people to understand that it's as natural as going and talking to a friend or going and talk to your pastor or anyone within your community and your circle. It is like a community process. And I think, especially in Guyana, where we're really big on community and being close, therapy can be a part of this community that we build. And I just really, really hope that one day we can get to the point where not many people see it as something to be stigmatized or something that we should look down on people on. I think that's why I go around telling people about my therapy experiences, just so I can make the language and the conversation around it as natural and positive as possible. And I find actually that most times, like when I'm meeting people in random situations and I tell them my background, they're ready to talk. So it's not an issue of people not really wanting to talk about their problems. I think it's maybe access, the taboo nature, and probably finding the right person, because having a therapist is like any other relationship you'll build. You have to actually feel out the person, see if they're the right person for you as well.
Okay. Now, at what point did you say, I know you said when you heard of Ghana being dubbed the suicide capital of the world, you said, hey, I must come back home, I must do my part. But tell me a bit about that transition. What year? You're just 27, right?
Yeah.
At such a young age, you decide that, you want to return home. Other people, sometimes they seek to leave. I see some people coming back now. But at a time when the oil industry, I think it was now starting up, you decided you wanted to come back home, not necessarily to tap into that industry, but to help people, regular people. What was the transition like, and what year you came back?
Okay, so there's like two major points in which I decided that I wanted to come back home. And keep in mind, this journey actually didn't go the way I expected it to. So at 16, when I was told about the suicide capital of the world, I went home and I did my research and I was like, okay, my plan is I'm going to go to university, I'm going to do my bachelor's, then I'm going to take a break, and then probably try to gain some clinical experience, and then go back, finish my doctorate. And then when I have all these fancy credentials, I'm going to go back and give my talents to my country. Then I get to university and I kind of started to change my mind. I'm like, okay, let me just do straight through bachelor's, straight through to doctorate, and like go back home during the summer, kind of get my feet wet, like get to build my network. So I came back at one point during my first year and I was a shadow for a psychiatrist at the Linden Hospital. But then I think something weird happened in my final year. I don't know if it was a bit of a crisis I was having or what it was, but I was like, you know what, I think I want to take a break indeed, at least 2 years, get some clinical experience. And then even before I graduated, I just started email all the companies I knew in Guyana that I saw was doing this work. And I had a friend back home. She would physically go and drop in applications for me. Then I came back home and I started working at Blossom Inc. and then everything changed.
Yeah, you've been working at Blossom Inc. for quite some time. Tell me about your role there and how impactful the work has been, some of the communities you visited, and the stories that touch you the most.
So when I first came back, there was a project. I don't know if you heard of Spotlight, the Spotlight
Yes,
Initiative.
definitely.
So that's actually how I came back into Guyana, through the Spotlight Initiative. So I was bothering our managing director, Ayo, for like a couple months about, getting into working at Blossom, but it was the height of the pandemic. No one was really hiring. There was like a kind of a halt in funding. So they didn't really have the space to bring people in. But because I was so persistent, which I always tell young women, you need to be annoying. You need to be in people's faces to get into rooms,
Yeah.
You have to put yourself at every table. So one day she called me and she was like, this might not be exactly what you were looking to do, but I think you do fabulous in this, in this department. And then she explained to me the job. The role of the job was education and outreach officer. And when she first described it to me and told me that it was about working with women and girls in terms of gender-based violence, I was a bit disappointed because actually at that point, now that I'm reflecting, I did not want to work I didn't want to work touching certain topics in terms of children who have been sexually violated, exploitation, domestic violence. I didn't feel comfortable or passionate about doing that. I just really strictly only wanted to work with children. And I had spent the last, I think at that point, 5 years of my life gaining experience only working with children. So when she told me about this, it kind of made me feel a bit disappointed. Like, I finally made the jump to come back home, which was a big risk at the time because you don't know if it's going to work out. But then I spoke to my partner about it, and then we both said, okay, this is a good opportunity. You can make connections. You never know where this job could lead you. And I think it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And in fact, about only 2 years ago did I realize that my time at Blossom Inc. kind of catapulted my career way further than it would have if I would have stayed in the U.S. and gotten a regular job there. It also made me realize, like, I didn't even realize I was achieving my dreams already. The dreams of going back home and touching the lives of so many people, the lives of so many children, and making a difference in terms of mental health and the overall well-being of a person. I didn't even realize it until 2 years ago. And it actually made me feel lost. Like, okay, I'm now realizing I hit this dream early on and I didn't even get my doctorate yet. What am I going to do from here? And it was really, really interesting. In terms of like the communities that we've been in, so started off with Spotlight, so that was mostly region 1 and 7. That was Matthews Ridge, Ramadan. Other projects included projects with UNHCR and PADF. So I've been to every region except 9. It's easier to just put it that way. This job also led me to see my country as a whole. So I don't only know Region 4 and the coastland areas. I know the hinterland areas, what they may be going through, or what a more in-between coastland and rural area may be going through. And that has led me to learn about different people all across Guyana in different walks of life. And what I found interesting actually is that so many people in Georgetown feel like the things that happen in the hinterland isn't happening right here in Georgetown, and we always think that it's only one group of people that's having these major problems, not knowing it's like all of us going through the same things. We just may present it differently,
Okay. How have these diverse experiences shaped your approach to mental health, going and interacting with people, like you said, from all walks of life?
So it's a bit funny because I actually said I never wanted to do social work. So the beginning of my career was a lot of social work. And I didn't even know it was actually called macro social work. And I believe now that I have begun finally practicing therapy, I recognize how much it has impacted the way in which I support clients. So whereas sometimes if you only focus on just your clinical psychology or counseling psychology, you kind of can forget that this person is a whole person with a whole life. And so social work kind of teaches you to see the person as their whole person within the context of their community. So when I'm providing therapy for children, within the scope of my job, they also gain an advocate. So if I'm also hearing about these other issues happening in school or in this environment, okay, I cannot just provide you with the therapy and then I have to send you back into this environment. We have to do something about this. So it also means that I'm also advocating for policy changes. It means I'm also advocating for different remedies and environments and all these other aspects of what can support and impact the entire person. and others who may be facing similar but may not have access to therapy.
Based on your outreaches, your interaction with children, what would you say are some of the primary issues confronting our children today?
I don't want to sound controversial, but Ayo always says that we must, we have this saying kind of that a lot of people don't actually like children, and it kind of leads to children being neglected and harmed in a lot of ways that we tend to kind of overlook. Children are incredibly stressed out in ways in which adults are looking at them like, you're just a child, what do you know about stress? But we forget that they have no control really over their lives and over their being. Their whole entire life is dictated by somebody else, whether it be their guardian or a parent or a school or somebody. And I think, or what I've realized rather, is children aren't getting choice, they aren't getting information, they aren't getting care, they aren't getting empathy. It's just like, it's always like a battle in their home. When you speak to them, it's like all they can think about is like the amount of rowing they have to listen to when they're home or in any environment, because I also provide therapy for the children at the juvenile holding center. And even in that environment, you see them being spoken to in punitive languages, a lot of exacerbated interactions between the adults and them. And it's just upsetting to watch how normalized we've made kind of abusing children, even if it doesn't seem like abuse to us because of our cultural norms. But that is the main thing, the amount of strain and stress we put children under because of our wanting to control them or our being tired from our day-to-day lives. It's really quite sad to see.
What are some of the things we definitely should not do as parents or as adults? You spoke about normalizing abuse, and that has a whole lot to do with, social issues and therapy. Therapy in the sense that we should seek help for not only children, but everybody. And like you said, it's not only about if you have an issue, it's just somebody, I just want to vent, I just want to have somebody to speak to. But going back to that issue of what are some of the things when you came back, it was like, wow, this is what we're normalizing now with respect to children. Would you be able to cite like an example?
Yeah, so actually I recognized it a bit before I came back. I wanted to, in my final year, you know how you have to do your final year thesis? I wanted to do a thesis on suicide and young people in Guyana to see if the young experiences in childhood kind of relate to the high numbers of suicide we're seeing. And when I first went into this project, I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking more at relationships because most of what we're hearing is like murder suicides or partners killing their partner over whatever. And I don't know how I didn't expect this to come up, but I was so surprised to see that most of our related experiences is from how we've been brought up as children and how we've been parented and the amount of trauma that we have unresolved. And so that kind of, when I came in, I was kind of further looking to sharpen that and look at that. And I think I just wasn't shocked anymore at that point. Like, I feel like now you can't tell me anything that a child has gone through that I would be genuinely surprised at. Like, I can listen to these stories and be like, this is kind of normal, unfortunately, to be able to say. And it was quite, in a way, it was validating because I was kind of remembering my experiences and realizing, okay, most of us who have grown up in Guyana have some form of unresolved trauma based on how we were parented and how we were, I don't want to use the word groomed, but, groomed and brought up. The amount of control that is there, the amount of accepting of abuse, the amount of punitive language that is put our way. Like, if you do something wrong, it's made into this whole big thing. If you want to make a certain decision or if you want to have a relationship, rather than walking the child through that process and, supporting them and learning how to navigate relationships healthy, it's like it's put down and it's, you can't do that, you're too young, and, it becomes a whole thing that it shouldn't, rather than guiding the child. Because at the end of the day, I don't think we realize that these children are going to grow up to be their own person. This is not a child. This is a person that will eventually have to go into society and engage with other adults. And we're not preparing our children enough for adulthood. So, what I'm seeing now is a lot of adults who kind of look for love in the workplace, who look, not just love in terms of romance, but like family, looking for family within the workplace, looking for someone who they can finally trust, looking for places where they can feel safe and comforted, and it tends to not be there because we're all coming from this place of unresolved trauma.
What does the work of a clinical psychologist in Ghana look like on a day-to-day basis?
As in, like, for me personally,
Yeah,
because
for
my
you.
day might look different from
Yeah,
somebody else's.
for you.
Yeah, so for me, mine is kind of different because I'm balancing still being in education and outreach, so still going out into communities, doing trainings, and supporting the development of gender-based rights and so on. So it's like I have like a bi-weekly schedule. Right now, I'm mostly providing services to the children at the Juvenile Justice Holding Center. That's also through Blossom Inc. So I'm currently providing therapy to those children there. As it is right now, that therapy looks like me going in, doing assessments or intakes with those children, and then tailoring my interventions based on what they have identified they want their goal to be, and also what I need to do to support them in their rehabilitation for when they go back into society. And then as of right now, I'm building and preparing to launch my own therapy private practice.
Okay. Now, I know that you are preparing to launch your own services this week, Soul Sen. Tell me a bit about the name. At first, I thought Soul, S-O-L. Maybe it comes from Solomon.
So it's the full thing is going to be Soul Sen Therapy and Coaching, because the coaching part will bring in my experience with providing social work and being a trained coach in that department. So Soul Sen, I was thinking of a name, and I said I wanted this name to reflect who I am as a person and the spaces I'm trying to build and what is needed when you provide therapy. So I basically kind of had different words that I put down. I said, what if I combine some words together and see where it takes me? So the soul stands for solace, meaning, a place of solace where you can feel comfortable, you feel safe, and then transcend, which is the sen part. So in therapy, our ultimate goal is to support you in your growth journey and to transcend beyond what your expectations of yourself are, beyond your limits. So that's the name.
I'm sure you would have done your SWOT analysis before launching your own business. What are some of the areas that you saw that there were gaps and needs that you say, hey, these services, coaching and providing therapy, would be crucial to citizens?
So oddly enough, how I kind of was able to identify the gaps was not only in my work with Blossom Inc. and our outreach, because a lot of people would come up to you and ask about therapy, but unfortunately...
And you did work in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, but that was mostly social work as well. Yeah. Which that also did play a part. So basically, I do nails part-time sometimes, right? And when I have somebody sit in my chair, and then when we get to talking, they find out about my background, and then probably within the moment or a couple days later, they would always ask me about, oh, then do you do therapy? Or it's so hard to find a therapist, or there's not many therapists out there, or I've tried this therapist and this didn't work for me. What do you recommend? Or they would just sit down and use their nail session as their therapy session. So I have clients who come every month and they would say, okay, I'm coming for my therapy session. I'm coming to be able to vent, and I provide that space for them. I even had one of them, because she knows of my background also with Blossom Inc., and she was, dealing with certain issues. She was like, I really wanted to call you this day so you can help provide me with some guidance. And, when I realized, okay, this is something that people are kind of needing and they're missing, and I know that there still is a gap in services in Guyana, that there's not that many mental health practitioners. I mean, in fact, when I was doing my bachelor's, I think we still only had 0.01% psychologists per 100,000 persons in Guyana. And I don't think that number has grown significantly since then. So there's still a large gap in mental health practitioners to support people in Guyana, especially young people, because my focus has always been, young people, meaning like up to 35 or so. And so when I reflect back on all of this, and then I also thought about the stigma is still there, the suicide rates are still there, how can I also render my services, or how can I throw myself into the pool? Because I'm only right now focusing on children, but now that I'm more out there, I'm realizing, okay, there's still a lot of young adults who still feel like they need somebody there in their life or in their corner that they can lean on. They don't really want to be able to just trauma dump on their friends, because that's not always the best thing to do or the safest thing to do. They just want to be able to have this safe space. And as you said, not just to only talk about a problem they're having, but it can be about just anything, just having that person.
Okay, what are some of the particular services you'll be offering when you launch this week, this coming week? I know you said coaching and therapy, but are there specifics?
So the therapy it's individual therapy, by the way. So there's no group therapy as it is right now, but individual therapy sessions are tailored to each client. So if the person comes in and we do a consultation and they say, okay, I want to work on grief and loss, the therapy is catered for that. If somebody comes in and they're like, I've been having this issue related to one moment I feel sad, one moment I feel happy, one moment I'm doing all these types of behaviors, then I would say, I think I have a bit of an idea what you might be experiencing. Let's explore that. So therapy is always individually designed for the person. It's never a one size fits all. Everyone's intervention is for them. For example, with the children that I work with, some of them I may, pull in bits of music therapy, where one of them, they may love writing songs, they like writing music, but they never had the space to. So our therapy surrounds, okay, how can we get how you're feeling onto the paper? Others, it might be reading, and I may hand pick books that relate to what issues that they might be dealing with, and I would say, let's read this book together, and then we're going to discuss it in the next session. So I try to kind of tailor the sessions based on their interests, because I like for it to be client-led. That's my main thing. You have to be the leader of your healing, and I'm just there to support and facilitate that healing. And then also, obviously, I still have to put in my clinical or my professional or expertise into, okay, how can we get you from here to here? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that this is an actual health process. This is a health service. So just like if you would go to the doctor if you have a cold or a flu or whatever may be troubling you, that at that time, that is how therapists also work. So it's not like just sitting down and giving advice. In fact, therapists don't give advice. What we're there to do is support you in identifying, what the root of this challenge is or what this challenge is, and then giving you the skills to basically manage what the challenge is and the skill to function in your life within that challenge or beyond that challenge. And then if it was to come up again, you now have the skill to deal with it. So it's like a place of healing and recovery, essentially.
How would this help families, whether adult families, or because you wouldn't be dealing with children only, but you'll be dealing with adults as well. So how would this help families and communities be stronger and healthier?
So we find that if someone is navigating in the world with challenges that they are ignoring or pushing down, or it's unresolved, it impacts how they function in their day-to-day life. So you may find that the man who is always at the bar first thing in the morning, he has problems that are unresolved. So now rather than spending time with his family or meaningfully engaging in the economy or his work or meaningfully engaging in his life in some other aspect, he's now trying to drown out whatever sorrows or challenges he's had by drinking. You may find that the young woman who hasn't fully healed from her past relationships may be taking it out on her children and she doesn't know, like all this pent up anger or trauma or whatsoever. As soon as her child does something wrong, she's ready to tear off because she hasn't yet learned how to essentially manage her emotions, or there's a lot that's unresolved.
So and I heard, let me cut you, because when you said about pent-up trauma, sometimes women say, oh, you're just like your father, or you're just like your mother. So that's an example that came to mind.
And that's also what I meant by like exacerbated interactions, like just for no reason at all, like because you haven't yet gained that sense of emotional control, which is fine. A lot of us go through challenges in life and it can kind of have us develop like, not so healthy coping skills. That's okay once you're ready to acknowledge and work on it. And then you can just see it come out in behavior and how they relate to others and how they may impact or have their impact on others. So that's an excellent example, actually. It's actually quite sad to see children as like the end point of someone's, trauma and them lashing out. I think that's also why many people say, it's really important that you heal before you get into the next relationship, because you don't want to bring that baggage and then make that other person responsible for that. So there's many ways, once again, that impacts society, because how are you getting to work? How are you essentially doing your work? How are you showing up for your family? How are you showing up for your friends? Having unresolved trauma and unresolved challenges in your life does it can really impact how you function. Like, for example, I can use me for as the example, because I wouldn't use another client. I remember when I was in university and I felt like everything had finally kind of built up, because I had spent all those years basically racing to get away and get out of that environment so I can be alone. So now that I'm finally alone and I'm like, the only voice I have to hear now is me. And then I'm in this place where I have no one. I have no friends, I have no family. And I don't even know where to reach out for help. And then I think it just came to a point where I kind of like fell apart. And my grades basically suffered for a little bit, not too much, because, I'm always a star. And then I just started ignoring everyone. And then the security guards come up to my room because my mother can't get on to me. It was like a whole thing, because I haven't at that point effectively dealt with what was going on with me. And I remember I finally found that university had a resource, but it wasn't enough because they had a long waiting list. And in my mind, I'm like, by the time I make it onto this on the waiting list to see you, what might happen, Mm-hmm. And that kind of happens here, where we don't have enough professionals to help people. And it's like, after they do all this waiting, or if they're told, just keep holding on, what is going to happen? What's the next move they're going to make? And it's not fair that so many people can't have access to the support that they so badly want and they so badly need, or they're not taken as seriously, or we make it seem less than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know you spoke about impacting communities and the country. Mm-hmm. You spoke about the importance of policies. And I know in Guyana's school system we have social workers. Mm-hmm. I know there's been a push to increase the number of social workers in our schools. But do you think that there's need for therapists, like specialists, to be placed at both primary and secondary schools? Would you see that as important?
So I think there's definitely a big need for school counselors. And I'm not only saying that just off of my personal experience, but I'm also saying it based on when we go into certain regions and communities and the schools directly come to us and say, hey, we've been without a school counselor for years now, and it's really needed. These children are falling apart, especially the schools that have the dorms. These children that are far away from their families, they don't have easy access to them. There's barely any signal, and then there's no school counselor available for those children to even like help them transition into being in this place all by themselves. So it's definitely needed.
Definitely needed. How would you, earlier we spoke about the issue of stigma and what is taboo, but how would you approach clients who may be afraid or skeptical or ashamed of seeking help? They know they need help, mm-hmm. but some people feel a whole lot of shame. How would you reach out? How would you approach that?
So it's a bit tricky, because in order for therapy to work, the client actually has to agree and want to engage. So usually our method is always education, trying different ways to make them see that therapy is something positive. It's not something that you have to be afraid of. It's not something that means that something is wrong with you. And just creating that space where it looks very normal, because it is normal. So I can only use the example of, the children at the holding center. One may say, no, I don't want to do therapy, but 10 others may say yes. So that one that said no, I said, that's okay. Whenever you're ready, you can come back to me and we can talk. Or if something's bothering you that day, we can talk. It's not a problem. Remember, at the end of the day, this is your choice. You get to choose if you want to do this or not. And then I find, after I go along and I'm working with the other boys, that one person may come back and say, but miss, why are you not talking to me? Why are you not coming and see me? So it's about creating this environment as a whole entire society where we make it so normal and it looks like something we show the benefits of it essentially. So the children, I think when others started to see that they've had this positive change in their behavior and their change in wanting to do better for themselves and wanting to try really hard, and others would see that, and others would even see that those boys would say, I don't want to do them kind of things anymore because, you know, I really want to get out of here. I really want to do better with my life. And then they may in their quiet moments think, this lady is coming every week, and just her presence alone brings something different into this space. I think I'm ready. Because I had one boy say, I don't really want, and then afterwards, I can't get him to stop talking. And I love it. It's really an enjoyable experience to me to see people just open up and rest in their space and say, you know, I kind of want to stay here for a bit more. You know, this is the only space that I have. And us being there to just support them in that process.
Now, in addition to therapy, you're offering coaching. Let's talk about that. What particular coaching sessions you're offering?
So,
and why?
Yeah, I was going to start with the why. So, I was talking to a colleague of mine about, you know, what kind of services I can offer. And then I realized, oh wait, I used to do coaching when I was working in the U.S. I was an educational vocational specialist, meaning that I supported children, they weren't children, young people who have experienced chronic homelessness or have been in the foster care system. I supported them in their educational and vocational goals. So I was there to support them in, you know, building up their confidence in applying for jobs, applying for school, applying for other programs. They trained us on how to do motivational interviewing and properly being this coach to these young people. I've also been a tutor in the past. I've been a nanny. I've been a support worker. So it was kind of like an amalgamation of all those skills I built. And I said, you know what? I think I'm really good at supporting people in, one, finding purpose or navigating them through finding their purpose through major life transitions, whether that be loss or moving to a new country or starting a new chapter in their life. And especially career related. As soon as somebody asks me a career related question, here I am going off. And then I know how to do resumes. I'm like, pull up your resume, let's fix this resume. And then even my therapist, she really, really helped me when I was having a lot of, I want to say fear, but it wasn't fear. I was feeling very lost and confused about, okay, where should I go in my career now? Because as I said before, I hadn't realized how many of my goals I'd already checked off that I thought I was only going to get to do it by 35 or something. And so seeing how she was able to support me as a whole person, I was like, okay, this is something that is also needed. And so the coaching is, you know, life transitions, career, life purpose, and I think there's one other, but I can't remember right now off the top of my head. And just as a side note, I also realized that through talking to friends and families across the Caribbean and the diaspora, it's like, why am I only limited to only offer to Guyanese? But why not the Eastern Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean as a whole? Because one of my best therapists I ever had, she was from Antigua. And I'm like, I could be like her. Like every time I have a new therapist, I'm always also looking to see, all right, what skills and what can I learn from them and how they offer. So she also like kind of supported that idea, like, okay, I can also be that somebody for others, just as she was for me, all the way from Antigua.
Okay. Where could I access your page? Like what platforms you're on? If somebody wants to know more about Soul Sen, where do they go? How do they get in contact with you?
So they can either access my Facebook page or my Instagram page, and then I'm also going to be making a TikTok page soon. They're all named Soul Sen Therapy, and on all those platforms, you'll see my name, not my name, but you'll see my name, my number, my email, and also a link to book, because some people may feel kind of uncomfortable just messaging you on WhatsApp. So that's okay. So if you just want to take the plunge and say, okay, I'm going to book my free consultation just to talk to her in a discreet virtual platform, I'm going to do that. So all those options are available. If they want to have a conversation before they even decide that they want to do that, that is there.
I know you'll be launching this week, but how soon could they access? Is it immediate? Immediate?
It's immediate. Yeah, I'm always ready to jump in and support.
Okay. What would you like to say as we prepare to wrap up to those who may be contemplating whether they need therapy or coaching? What would you want to say to policymakers and parents in general?
Okay. So I won't say anything to policymakers because it might impact my job, but I would just want to give the reminder to everyone that always remember that nothing has to be wrong with you, or nothing has to be going wrong in your life for you to want to go to therapy. Therapy is whatever you decide to make it. It is your space for your solace and to transcend. As I said before, why I chose that name. And then to parents and families, it's also okay if you want to access therapy as a whole family unit and say, okay, we as a family, we can, be better for one another. I want to take care of myself so I can better take care of you and look out for you. This is a community process. Why not access it? Why not access the support that's there for you?
Okay, thank you so much for joining me on Sources, Josie. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Sources. I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall. Stay well.